At the Willow Creek Estates HOA Annual Appreciation Gala, amid the clinking of crystal flutes and the fake laughter echoing off fake wood paneling, they looked right through me and saw nobody. "I can't recall your name," the treasurer's wife said with a dismissive little shrug, her pearls catching the chandelier light like tiny warnings. "What is it you do?" I just smiled, setting down my napkin. If any of them had ever bothered to read the fine print on the monthly dues statements they loved to complain about, they would have seen my name, Emily Harper, typed neatly on the authorized signer line of every single transaction. That night, I simply scheduled a quiet lesson for the following week at the same table. My name is Emily Harper, and at 35, I had become a master at being invisible. Tonight's performance was at the Willow Creek Clubhouse, a place so drenched in McMansion money and fresh-cut grass smell that the air felt thick with entitlement. Soft golden lights pulled across white tablecloths, and a live pianist tinkled out polite melodies that tried to hide the raw power plays happening all around. I was there with my husband, Jake, a solid software engineer who was far too decent for this suburban theater. Vanessa Croft, the HOA president, glided through the room like a queen inspecting her peasants. She clapped Jake on the shoulder with that fake warm gesture. "Jake, good to see you. Big things happening with the new pool rules next quarter, I hear." Her eyes, cold and assessing, slid right over me the same way she might glance at a slightly crooked mailbox she was about to find. I was decoration, an accessory to the man she actually wanted to impress. I smiled faintly, used to the eraser. We were seated at the head table, a strategic honor. Miranda Warwick, the treasurer's wife and the queen bee of this polished hive, leaned across the linen. Her diamonds flashed like little threats. "And you are?" She let the question hang, then turned to Jake. "Oh, you with Jake? Forgive me." She swung back to me with a saccharine smile. "What is it you do to keep busy?" She stretched the word busy like it was something quaint and pathetic, like knitting booties or collecting those awful garden gnomes everyone hated. "Finance," I replied, voice even. A delicate tinkling laugh escaped her. "Oh, how fascinating. You mean the household budget?" Before I could answer, one of the board members, Henderson, whose tie was choking him, launched into a story. "Speaking of finance, the dues collection went off without a hitch this month. Real miracle, thanks to my guys in accounting." Laughter rippled. They were all in on the joke, the bumbling, faceless back office people who just pushed paper. I made a mental note of his name. I'd seen it on the approval line of every overpriced landscaping invoice. He clicked buttons, but held no real power. The final signature that actually moved money? Mine. Vanessa raised her glass of Chardonnay, the pale liquid glowing. A toast to the people who make Willow Creek Estates the jewel it is. Her gaze swept the table, the board members, their overdressed spouses. It passed over me again, blank and unseeing. Not once did anyone's eyes settle on me. I was not one of the people who made Willow Creek. I was just a plus one. As they drank, I gently folded the corner of my napkin, a small anchor. My mind wasn't on the insult. It was on numbers. I thought about the primary escrow account Harmony Pay Services managed for Willow Creek, the seven-figure balance that covered every vendor payment, every common area maintenance run, every single dime of those monthly dues. I thought about the secondary contingency fund and the specific clauses in our service agreement that governed every release. My fingers resting on the table could, with a few keystrokes on a secure terminal, place a hold on every board member's expense reimbursement and every shady vendor payment while they toasted their own greatness. I was mentally auditing the very system that paid for their overpriced clubhouse dinners and their volunteer stipends. In that quiet moment, as the pianist played on and the laughter continued, I made a decision. This wasn't about hurting anyone. It wasn't about anger. It was about clarity. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be precise. It would be about making them remember the name they had spent years pretending didn't exist. The smile stayed fixed on my face, a polite mask I had perfected after 3 years of enduring Vanessa's ridiculous fines. $250 for my mailbox being 1 inch too high $150 for unauthorized petunias that were actually the exact shade approved last year. The performance of Willow Creek family culture was in full swing. The clubhouse walls were plastered with glossy photos of smiling residents at last year's block party. Kids with cotton candy faces, posters screaming, "We're all in this together." Yet for the past 3 years, the annual community improvement rebates, those tiny checks meant to make homeowners feel valued, have been delayed again and again. They always arrived eventually, but months late, with a snooty email from the board citing unforeseen administrative hurdles. Everyone knew it was a cash flow game so Vanessa and her friends could keep their stipends fat. It was the kind of family that hugged you for the photo op, then fined you for breathing wrong when no one was looking. I remember a conversation with Jake just last month. He'd come home exhausted after fighting a proposed rule that would ban any flag except the American one on designated holidays. "Maybe I should just sell and leave," he'd said. I put my hand over his. "No, don't quit. Don't make a scene. Let them be exactly who they are." He didn't understand then, but he trusted me. Back at my quiet home office later that night, long after the crystal clinking had faded, the real work began. The laptop hummed to life, its cool blue light a sharp contrast to the clubhouse's warm lies. My employer was Harmony Pay Services, the company every HOA in the county used for dues processing and vendor payments. Willow Creek was one of our clients. I wasn't just a guest at their dinner. I was the invisible gatekeeper with level 2 clearance. I navigated to their commercial account file. The revolving line they held with us was substantial. The lifeline that let the board pay vendors, reimburse themselves, and keep the common areas looking perfect while they fined residents into oblivion. I pulled up the covenant compliance reports. To an untrained eye, everything looked fine, but I saw the fractures. 3 times in 2 years, their vendor expense ratio had crept dangerously close to breach thresholds. Each time, a miraculous correction appeared right before deadline. Non-cash adjustments, vague consulting fees, creative bookkeeping, a shell game. And they had no idea the quiet woman they had mocked as a garden-obsessed housewife was the one who could see every crack. They saw Jake's wife, a pleasant, forgettable woman in a tasteful dress. What they didn't see was the architect of the system they took for granted. My professional life wasn't built under clubhouse chandeliers, but in the cold blue glare of monitors, encrypted files, and binding clauses. I had drafted the operational addendums myself. Vanessa's flamboyant signature was on the master agreement. My name, Emily Harper, sat quietly on the signature page for the appendices that actually controlled the money. My official title sounded boring, authorized signer level 2. In reality, it meant I was the final human checkpoint. Every bi-weekly batch of payments, vendor invoices, common area maintenance, board reimbursements, sat in pending status until my digital signature released them. Buried deep in the 50-page contract was Appendix 9B, the anomaly escalation protocol I had written myself. The board's lawyers had called it boilerplate. It was anything but. It said that if any vendor payments to a potential related party exceeded 2% of monthly operating expenses in a rolling 60-day window, the entire disbursement batch would flag for manual review. And I was the only one who had ever read it all the way through. That night, I logged in from home. I didn't hack anything. I simply wrote one new line of code. A quiet tripwire. I set a reminder for next Thursday evening, the night of the next board appreciation dinner. If they gathered again and once more looked at me like I was nothing, I would press one button and their perfect little world would stop. The week between the 2 galas was a quiet storm of digital reconnaissance. My work wasn't emotional, it was surgical. From my terminal, I had a god's eye view of Willow Creek's financial entrails. I started with vendor payments. A name popped immediately, Emerald Lawn Pros. Invoices for strategic landscaping realignment, executive grounds optimization. Always vague, always just under the threshold that would need extra board approval. Each one 5 figures. Emerald Lawn wasn't a real company on the open market. No website, no reviews, nothing. I ran a public record check through Harmony Pays databases. The LLC was registered to a family trust. The name on the trust? Jonathan Warwick, Vanessa Croft's brother-in-law. There it was. The president was funneling HOA dues, our neighbor's money, into her own family's pocket for services that were probably never performed. Nepotism at best, outright fraud at worst. Exactly the kind of anomaly Appendix 9B was built to catch. I opened the rule editor and wrote the new definition, cold and ironclad. If cumulative payments to any flag-related party vendor exceeded 2% of monthly OPEX in a 60-day window, the entire disbursement batch would escalate for Level 2 review. The Emerald Lawn payments for the last 60 days cleared that threshold by a mile. The trap was set, but I wasn't going to punish the regular homeowners who just wanted their pools clean and their streets swept. That's where the Resident Shield Protocol came in. Harmony Pays premium service included a protected escrow that could front community maintenance payments in case of client-side failure. I ran a sandbox simulation. When a new rule triggered, the system would automatically split the batch. Non-board expenses, pool chemicals, trash service, common area mowing would release instantly from the Shield Fund. The board's reimbursements, stipends, and all Emerald Lawn payments would freeze hard. Notifications would be clinical, scheduled disbursement pending executive-level compliance review. Status on hold. Perfect confusion, perfect paper trail. I drafted the formal memo for our internal records, dry, procedural, entirely within my authority. I was simply doing my job. The board had been so dazzled by the 18% processing fee reduction, they never read the fine print that gave me the scalpel. I saved the rule, but didn't activate it yet. This would be a response, not a random glitch. I set a conditional alert for 6:55 p.m. next Thursday. The trigger wouldn't be the data. The trigger would be them. If they sat at that table again and indulged in their casual cruelty, if they looked at me and saw a nobody, I would press the button and their kingdom would freeze. The days leading up were a masterclass in quiet escalation. First, I sanitized my position. I submitted a sterile request to Harmony Pays risk team, Level 3 verification of vendor Emerald Lawn pros against known related parties of Willow Creek board members. The report came back in hours, same P.O. box as the Warwick Family Trust. Now, it was an official corporate fact, time-stamped and neutral. Next, I engaged legal through the compliance portal. Pursuant to Appendix 9B, potential undisclosed related party transactions detected. Please prepare standard notice of inquiry for independent board members only. The template they returned was polite, professional, and lethal, addressed straight to the independent directors, bypassing Vanessa and her inner circle. I needed an ally inside. I scanned the independent directors. Most were retired executives who nodded along at meetings before heading to the golf course. But one name stood out. Nora Keene, former CFO, new to the board, famous for asking the uncomfortable questions. She hated drama, but loved data. Perfect. I sent a short professional email requesting 15 minutes on future Treasury trends. She agreed to coffee downtown Wednesday morning. We exchanged pleasantries for 30 seconds before she cut to the chase. You didn't ask me here to talk cash sweeps, Emily. What's this about? I slid my tablet across the table. Spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, vague descriptions, and the trust link at the bottom. Nora's eyes scanned. She took a slow sip of coffee, expression unreadable. After a full minute, she looked up. If these numbers are accurate, the audit committee needs an emergency session. I nodded. I believe they are. She stood. Send me the file. I'll handle protocols from here. The meeting lasted 9 minutes. The fuse was lit. That evening, I considered telling Jake. I found him in the living room. He looked tired. Another email from the board demanding he trim the hedge exactly 42 inches or face another fine. I almost spoke, then saw the weariness in his eyes. Dragging him in would risk everything. I smiled instead. Just thinking about dinner. This was my battle. I would not ask him to set himself on fire. Back at my desk, I cross-referenced wire timestamps. Approval for Emerald Lawn payments happened within the hour every single time, an efficiency never granted to any legitimate vendor. Another dry, irrefutable fact. My plan for Thursday was now timed to the minute. Digital choreography meeting physical theater. At 6:58 p.m., I would activate the escalation. Non-board services would release from the Shield Fund. Board reimbursements would lock. At 7:01 p.m., the legal notice would hit the independent directors. At 7:02 p.m., I would walk into the clubhouse just as appetizers were served, envelope in hand. Thursday arrived with the cold finality of a court date. By 6:30 p.m., I was in my home office command center. The air was still. Jake was upstairs dressing for the gala. On my desk lay the single printed authorization form, face down. My system showed real-time feeds. The Willow Creek disbursement batch, every line item, was loaded and waiting. The clock ticked with surgical precision. At 6:45 p.m., my phone vibrated. A text from Nora Keene, spare as always, document forwarded to independent chairman. He is reviewing. The first stone had dropped. It was now formally inside the walls Vanessa couldn't sanitize. The first tremor from their side came at 6:52 p.m. An email from Arthur Vance, Willow Creek's general counsel. Subject, urgent query re, Harmony Pay Service Agreement. Tone impeccably polite, pure threat. MS. Harper, we're taking this matter with utmost seriousness. We would appreciate the courtesy of a 48-hour administrative hold on any related actions. They wanted time to shred, to align stories, to bury Emerald Lawn. I typed one sentence. Thank you for the notification. Harmony Pay will proceed according to the protocols in the signed service agreement. Send. My refusal wasn't aggressive. It was procedural. I was following the rules they had signed. 3 minutes later, 6:55 p.m., a frantic message through the client portal from the HOA manager. Urgent. Is there an issue with the disbursement batch? We are hearing rumors. Any delay will cause significant distress among residents. Emotional blackmail. They were trying to paint me as the villain harming the little guy. They had no idea I had already shielded the little guys. I clicked the checkbox. Initiate resident shield protocol. Confirmation window. This will fund all non-board community services from protected escrow. Client will be billed for service plus contractual penalties. I confirmed. On screen, the batch split. The larger portion, pool chemicals, trash, common mowing, turned green and queued for instant release. The board portion glowed red, escalated, manual authorization required. 6:58 p.m. 2 minutes to deadline. I navigated to the master release screen. The entire Willow Creek batch now flashed red. I clicked review, typed the justification. Undisclosed related party vendor payments exceeding 2% OPEX threshold. Pending board-level certification per Appendix 9B. My heart was steady. Point of no return. I clicked execute hold. At exactly 7 p.m., the log entry appeared. Non-board community services released. Transaction ID confirmed. The money for every resident's daily life was flowing. The shield held. 7:01 p.m. My pre-scheduled email fired to Nora and the independent directors. The formal legal notice requesting conflict of interest investigation. The first knock on the boardroom door had landed. 7:02 p.m. I closed every secure window. Laptop lid clicked shut. I picked up the warm printed form, folded it neatly into an envelope. I checked my reflection in the hall mirror. No trace of the storm I had just commanded. Just Emily Harper, wife of a software engineer, on her way to dinner. Jake waited at the bottom of the stairs holding my coat. Ready? I asked, voice perfectly calm. Ready, he said. He didn't know the details, but he knew something was coming. He trusted me. At 7:03 p.m., we stepped onto the manicured cobblestones of the clubhouse lot. Yellow light spilled from the windows. I could hear the faint piano, precisely on time for appetizers. We were seated at the same table. The lighting was the same soft, forgiving gold. The same pianist played the same unobtrusive melodies. But the air was different, taut, expectant, like the second before lightning strikes. Jake sat beside me, silent, solid presence. Appetizers arrived, delicate seafood towers. As the waiter set a plate in front of me, Vanessa Croft leaned forward, broad, patronizing smile. "Emily, is it?" She boomed so the whole table could hear. "See, I remember this time. You're the garden lady, right?" A wave of sycophantic laughter washed over them. Henderson chuckled too loud. Miranda offered a thin, superior smile. They were all performing. I simply smiled back, neutral. I took a sip of water. Miranda, never one to be upstaged, turned to me, diamonds flashing. "Well, I do hope everything is in order this month. Was the disbursement on time? I simply cannot abide financial drama. It's so terribly common." This was my cue. I placed my glass down with a soft, deliberate click. Every eye turned. I reached into my clutch, movements unhurried, and retrieved the plain, white envelope. I slid it across the linen. It stopped directly in front of Vanessa's bread plate. "There's a small hold. Actually, Vanessa," I said, voice quiet but carrying perfectly. She stared at the envelope like it was a rattlesnake. Annoyance flickered across her face. This was not on her script. She tore it open with her thumb. Inside the room, the gentle clink of silverware and low murmurs continued for a few more seconds. Then Vanessa's eyes reached the bolded line. Board disbursement distribution. Status pending board clearance and related party inquiry. Her face didn't change, but her focus sharpened like a camera snapping into focus. Miranda leaned over, curiosity piqued by the silence. She saw the signature line at the bottom, authorized by Emily Harper. The dismissive smirk on Miranda's face didn't vanish. It froze, then shattered. Her skin tightened over her cheekbones. Her lipstick became a grotesque gash in a suddenly bloodless face. Across the table, Henderson frowned and pulled out his phone. It had vibrated. His eyes widened at the preview. "Why is my reimbursement pending?" Then the sound stopped. It was as if someone had thrown a switch. The pianist's hands fell silent mid-phrase. A waiter froze, arm outstretched holding a dish. The low murmur of the entire room died away, leaving ringing silence. The only sound was the tiny buzz of a dozen phones vibrating simultaneously as the same notification hit every board member at once. The hold was real. Every eye locked on me. No one was smiling now. I picked up my fork, calm and measured. I looked from Vanessa's stunned face to Miranda's mask of horror. "Every resident's community services have been paid on time and in full," I said, voice cutting cleanly through the silence. "Harmony Pays Resident Shield guaranteed it. As for the rest of you, your reimbursements, stipends, and vendor payments are simply on hold until the independent board can certify that neighborhood money isn't finding its way into the wrong houses." The silence was a physical weight pressing down on the starched tablecloths. Vanessa's face, usually flushed with power, turned a dangerous red. She finally spoke, voice low and guttural. "You don't have the authority." It wasn't a question. It was dogma. Nobodies do not have authority. I didn't raise my voice. I tapped one manicured finger on the paper in front of her. Page 47 of the Harmony Pay Master Service Agreement. Appendix 9B, the Anomaly Escalation Protocol. The clause grants a Level 2 authorized signer. That's me. Full discretion to place any disbursement batch on compliance hold in the event of suspected material irregularity, including undisclosed related party transactions. The agreement was executed last year. The signature on it is yours. Her eyes darted to the paper, then back to me. Real animal panic flickered. She had signed it without reading it, dazzled by the fee reduction. She had handed me the gun herself. Miranda recovered enough to hiss, "This is extortion. You're holding our money hostage." "No," I corrected gently, gaze sweeping the stunned faces. "I'm holding your money. The resident services are already paid. I'm not holding anything hostage, Miranda. I'm protecting the assets of this homeowners association from its own board. I let that statement hang. I had reframed the narrative. I was not the attacker. I was the guardian. This can all be resolved, I continued, tone helpful consultant. In fact, it can be resolved in the next 15 minutes. You just have to agree to a few simple corrective actions. Consider it my proposal. I laid out the terms, each one a surgical cut. 1. The independent members of the board will immediately open a formal investigation into the relationship between Willow Creek HOA and the vendor known as Emerald Lawn Pros. I paused, looking straight at Vanessa. She was staring at her water glass like it held the secrets of the universe. 2. The president will recuse herself effective immediately from any vendor approval or payment authorization process for landscaping or consulting services. That authority will be temporarily delegated to the corporate controller pending the board's review. 3. Willow Creek will seek the immediate and full repayment of all funds paid to Emerald Lawn over the past 12 months. Failure to secure repayment will result in the sum being deducted from the board's annual stipend pool. 4. The HOA will draft and publicly release a new, more stringent conflict of interest policy for all board members within the next 30 days. I'll let the first 4 points settle. They were unavoidable. But I wasn't finished. This wasn't just punishment. It was justice. And one final condition. My voice took a harder edge. You will announce at tomorrow morning's all residents email blast an immediate 4% reduction in monthly HOA dues for every homeowner, effective next cycle. That reduction will be funded entirely by a corresponding cut in this year's board's stipend pool and clawback from Emerald Lawn. Your neighbors get lower dues. You pay for it. Consider it a lesson in the family culture you're so proud of. Henderson actually choked on air. That's impossible. It's not in the budget. It is now, I replied smoothly. It will be funded by the exact amount you've been quietly funneling to your own family. This was the blow they never saw coming. It wasn't just an attack on their wallets. It was an attack on their entire philosophy, the unspoken rule that the spoils always flowed upward to the board while residents got fined for breathing. Vanessa stared at me, mind racing for an angle. And if we tell you to go to hell? I gave her a placid smile. Then the hold remains in place for the full 48-hour compliance window, as stipulated in the contract, at the end of which Harmony Pay will be legally required to file a notice of material financial irregularity with our parent bank, who also happens to be the primary holder of the HOA's reserve line of credit. I can't imagine their risk department will be pleased to learn that board disbursements are frozen due to a self-dealing investigation. I'm sure it won't affect your loan covenants at all. The blood drained from her face. I had them. They weren't just risking delayed stipends. They were risking the entire financial lifeline of the association. As if on cue, my phone lit up. A notification from the secure board group chat Nora had added me to. Nora's message. Full council has reviewed the Harmony Pay contract. MS. Harper is within her rights. The financial and legal exposure of a prolonged dispute is unacceptable. Recommend immediate compliance with all terms. Vanessa's phone buzzed at the same moment. She glanced down, and I watched the last of her resistance crumble. She was cornered. The independent directors would not back her in a fight she had already lost. She looked around the table. No allies. The fawning smiles had been replaced by masks of fear and resentment. Her court had abandoned her. I reached into my clutch again and pulled out a simple, elegant fountain pen. I placed it on the table between us. The soft, definitive click sounded like a gavel. The choice is yours, Vanessa. The release authorization is ready on my phone. All it needs is my signature. But first it needs yours on a written acceptance of these terms. I looked her straight in the eye. You sign, I release. The air grew thick. Every breath felt measured. All the bluster, all the casual power Vanessa had worn like her designer jacket, had been stripped away. She was just a woman trapped between public humiliation and financial ruin. Nora's message had been the fatal blow. She had no allies left. Her hand, usually so steady when signing fines, trembled slightly as she reached for the pen. She picked it up. It felt alien in her grasp. A hastily drafted board resolution accepting my terms had been messengered over from the chairman's office. It lay on the table like a death warrant. She uncapped the pen. The sound was a sharp, brittle crack in the silence. She bent over the paper, shoulders hunched in defeat. The nib touched the line. She signed. The black ink spread like an oil slick, a permanent stain on her authority. The document passed to Miranda. Her face was ashen. Vanessa's hand shook so violently she could barely guide the pen. Her signature became a spidery, illegible scrawl, testament to her shattered composure. The imperious queen of the suburban spouses was gone, replaced by a frightened woman who had just watched her carefully constructed world implode. As the last signature dried, my phone buzzed. New message in the group chat from the chairman. Board Resolution 2025 to 117 formally accepted and ratified. 7:27 p.m. The terms were now a binding corporate act. It was my turn. I picked up my phone, movements slow and deliberate. Everyone watched my hands like they were weapons. I unlocked the screen, opened the Harmony Pay Authorization app, navigated to the pending board disbursement. Final confirmation screen showed the total sum, hundreds of thousands, and the list of recipients. I pressed authorize. Two-factor code appeared on my watch. I typed it. Biometric scan. Thumb on sensor. The screen showed processing, then turned green. Board disbursement released. Transaction ID confirmed. 7:28 p.m. It was done. A wave of pathetic relief rippled through the room. Phones buzzed one after another with the notification they had been praying for. Scheduled disbursement has been processed. One board member let out a loud, relieved exhale. Then his phone buzzed again. The follow-up email from the HOA office announcing the 4% dues reduction and the mandatory audit. The relief instantly soured into resentful understanding. They had their money back, but they would be paying for it for a very long time. Throughout it all, Jake had been silent. He now turned to me, eyes wide. The look on his face wasn't just surprise. It was awe, profound respect he had never been allowed to witness in this arena before. I carefully folded my napkin and stood. My chair scraped softly on the polished floor. Every eye followed me. I don't need any of you to remember my name, I said, voice even and devoid of triumph. I looked at Vanessa, then Miranda. I just need you to remember to read your contracts. The clubhouse manager appeared at Vanessa's elbow, face a mask of professional concern. Shall I have them bring out the dessert course, MS? Croft. Vanessa just shook her head, gaze fixed on the signed resolution. She didn't say a word. Before turning to leave, I reached into my clutch one last time. I pulled out a second, thicker envelope. I walked around the table and placed it gently in front of Miranda. She flinched as if it were on fire. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's a complete bound copy of the Harmony Pay Service Agreement," I replied with perfect politeness, with all the appendices. "I thought you might like your own, so you can actually read it this time." I didn't look back. With Jake at my side, I walked out of the suffocating silence of the dining room and onto the stone terrace. The air outside was cool and clean, carrying the fresh scent of coming rain. A gentle, misty drizzle had begun, dotting the dark flagstones. Behind me, through the tall glass doors, the scene was perfectly framed by the warm yellow light. A tableau of ruin, a silent collection of well-dressed figures motionless around a table of half-eaten appetizers. Their faces illuminated like subjects in a somber painting. My phone vibrated in my hand. Not a text or call. A flood of notifications from the Willow Creek residents group chat. Messages from names I didn't even know. Did anyone else just get the email about the 4% dues reduction? OMG, it's real. HR confirmed. Thank you to whoever made this happen. Seriously, thank you. They didn't know who I was and likely never would. They just knew that for the first time in years, the HOA family culture had actually felt like family. I smiled, a genuine, private smile in the growing darkness. I closed the app and sent one encrypted text to Nora Keene. Release done. Shield fund settled. Closing ticket. Suddenly the glass doors slid open with a jarring sound. Heavy panicked footsteps echoed on the stone. Wait, it was Vanessa. She had chased after us, face pale and slick with sweat in the dim light. She stopped a few feet away, chest heaving. Wait, her elegant scarf, askew. The carefully constructed facade of the all-powerful HOA president was completely gone. She stared at me, eyes filled with desperate, uncomprehending fury. Who are you? She gasped. The question was an admission of total defeat. In her world, power had a title, a gavel, a reserved parking spot at the clubhouse. I had none of those things. I didn't fit her reality. I didn't answer. Instead, I simply looked down at the crumpled resolution she was still clutching. I raised one steady finger and pointed at the bottom of the page. She followed my gesture, eyes struggling to focus. Under her own signature, authorized signer, Emily Harper. I'll let her read it. I'll let the two words sink into the wreckage of her understanding. Then I met her gaze one last time, voice level and cold, carrying easily over the soft patter of the rain. Last week you called me a nobody. Tonight you learned the name of the person who signed your checks. I gave her no time to respond. There was nothing more to say. The lesson was over. I turned my back, buttoned my coat against the chill, and took Jake's hand in mine. His grip was firm, a silent anchor. We walked away from the clubhouse, leaving Vanessa Croft standing alone in the doorway, a relic of her own collapsed empire. The gentle drizzle turned into a steady, cleansing rain. Its sound grew louder, rushing in the darkness, washing over the manicured lawns and the silent lighted windows until it was the only sound left in the world. And that, neighbors, is how a quiet housewife reminded an entire HOA board that sometimes the person you ignore at dinner is the one holding the keys to your kingdom. Thank you so much for listening to this HOA Karen story. I'd love to know your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from so we can all connect. If you enjoyed the drama and that sweet justice moment, please subscribe, hit like, and smash that hype button to help more people see what happens when a Karen finally meets her match. Your support means the world. See you in the next neighborhood nightmare.